Hey, gospel supporters, Matt Boyd here. I only tell you my name because you may not recognize me. I normally have a beard about down to here, and my wife, Andrea, had a very big birthday in the month of August, and so one of her requests was that she could see my face again. So just a couple weeks ago, I shaved off my beard, and I've had to reintroduce myself to a lot of people. On top of that, wearing the mask, even though the mask covers your face, I still have this large beard hanging off of it. So it's been fun and interesting to have to reintroduce myself to people all over the city of Portland. So I just figured I'd take a minute to reintroduce myself to you. Last month was the first month of really doing just a video update of how life is here and Sojourn and how everything is going, and I got a lot of really good feedback from that, so I thought I would just do another brief video update for you. It is hard to believe that we are at the very last day of August, which we traditionally think of as being as the end of summer. And this summer has looked entirely different than any of our previous summers here in Portland. Much like life where you are, it seems like many things or almost everything was canceled. There were no kids camps and no concerts in the park and no festivals throughout our city. But instead, we had to lean into kind of different rhythms. And so August for us, one thing that we did every single week was we had church in the park. For those of you who've been to Portland, we have parks all over the city. It's a beautiful place. And although we are known to have a lot of rainy weather, summer it does not rain at all. It is dry for a solid 3 months, and so it's a perfect time to meet outside. Unlike those of you in North Carolina where I am from, for example, we met yesterday and it was like 60-some degrees in the morning. Now it'll get warmer, but it's been nice and cool mornings whenever we are gathering outside at the park. There's a park called Mount Tabor Park. It's an extinct volcano. And that allows us to meet, to social distance, to space out, but to still see each other in person. I'm sure you can relate if you've been to an in-person gathering where you are. It's just something better than seeing each other on a screen, on Zoom, but actually see each other face to face. We were able to come together as the church and to worship through song and just sing together. It was just something we had all missed. Able to take communion. Once again, all the COVID precautions and protocols are in place when we're doing this, but be able to come together around the Lord's table and be reminded of what the Lord has done for us, and being reminded that none of us are ushers, but we're all guests at the table that Jesus has prepared, and then also to come around the Word of God. And so we've been preaching through the book of Philippians, a series we've been calling Priorities. And each week we're asking ourselves, what am I living for? Me as an individual, and then us collectively as a church body. What is it that we are living for, specifically in this cultural moment? And what I mean by that is we found ourselves in 2020, a year that none of us would have planned, a year that most of us would have hit skip and fast forward to the next year if we could have, if we had known about it. But regardless, we've all found ourselves in this quarantine, in this pandemic, with COVID-19. There's been race conversations that have been heightened at a new level, at least from my generation. There have been protests, and there have been, some of those have turned violent into riots. There have been prayer protests and peaceful protests, and then just a number of other things have happened in 2020. And so we can't change what has happened, but we have to think about how does it we respond as the people of God. And so what is it that we are living for? And that my hope is that 2020 has caused all of us to reprioritize our values and to think, what is it that I'm actually living my life for? Just yesterday, we had a guest preacher at Sojourn, and we looked at this idea of straining toward the goal in Philippians chapter 3, verses 12 through 21. And we talk about this idea of like a goal of goals. And so what is it as the people of God that, yes, we might have a goal for my career aspirations or my family aspirations or the type of house I want to buy, but there's a goal of all goals where we put on our gospel lenses as people of faith, as Christians, and that should inform how it is that we attain and reach towards those other goals. And so we've really enjoyed going through the book of Philippians. We are starting chapter 4 at our next gathering, so we're down to just 2 or 3 more sermons in that before we move on to the next emphasis for the fall. And so that was something we were able to do every single week. Our groups, which we call Gospel Community, we actually took a break for the month of August. Not because they were canceled, but it's one of the nicest months of weather here. People were traveling and taking trips. So we said, you know what, let's take the pressure off, feeling like you got to try to make a gathering and a group for the month of August. And we'll just kind of take a break and just encourage people just to get together naturally. Just get together to enjoy a meal with one another. and to get together with neighbors and friends, and to take trips down to the beach and do all of these things that are fun to do in the summer. So we took a break from those, but for my family, because we typically are hosting our group, it allowed us to invite a number of people over to our house. And we moved recently, I think some of you knew that, so some of our old neighbors we were able to have over at our house during the month of August, and then another church planter here in the city, and just it kind of freed us up to do something that maybe we felt like on a weekly basis we didn't always have the time to do with hosting a group and things for church. As far as outreach this past month, we continue doing our monthly serve night. It has looked different with COVID. We have, for the last 3 months, including August, we picked up takeout. And so we serve at the Portland Rescue Mission, the Harbor. The Harbor is a place for men who are transitioning and getting discipled and poured into. Most of them were addicted to some kind of substance abuse. And so they're in a program for 1 year to 2 years. And I tell you, every single time that we go, I am just so blessed by their stories. Even this past week, it was on Thursday, I dropped off food. And of course, if you show up and your pastor, they want you to share a little bit. So I just shared real briefly. And I had a guy come up for about 10 minutes and just share part of his story with me, and how just even the few words I had shared had encouraged him. And so that's someone that we continue to partner with. It has looked different, but we've continued to stay consistent with that. The food pantry we've been volunteering is still going on. They're still going strong. We did not send any volunteers over this month, not because we didn't want to. We just didn't have the manpower in order to do that, but we plan on jumping back in with them here in the month of September, and just offering assistance wherever and however we are able to do. And then we also did an emphasis this month as we took a break from our gospel community, where we did what we call Midweek Prayer. And that was every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. And we met at different parks throughout the city each week, and just said, here's where we're going to be. And we had 2 main things that we were praying for. The first is we were praying for clarity. Clarity for the future. And so most of you, I think, know at this point, but I'm not only planting and pastoring Sojourn Church, but I'm also been doing interim work at another church plant called Eastbridge. Now, before you think, well, wait a minute, like, is he getting overwhelmed? We've been doing everything basically together as far as when our gatherings meet and those types of things. And so we've been doing stuff together for about 5 months. We're knocking on the door of 6 months. And so I just really want us to be intentional about praying. What does it look like for the future? Is this an interim period, and we're sister churches and we need to go our separate ways, or do we continue to work together? Do we bring these 2 things together? And so just asking the people of God to seek God for clarity on that. And many of you joined us in that, so I thank you for that. And I ask that you continue to pray for clarity. There's a meeting probably this week that'll at least give some form of answer towards that direction. So I ask you continue to pray for that. The second thing we were praying for was unity. Unity as the church. There have been a lot of things in 2020 that can divide us. There have been things in 2020 that have divided us. And that's probably going to continue, because we're in this thing called an election year, and we all have opinions on who should be elected, and not just to the president office, but other offices as well. And so just praying for unity, that God would unify us as his people. Unity does not mean uniformity. So it doesn't mean that we're all going to look exactly the same and 100% vote exactly the same way and hold all the exact same values. But being unified under Jesus, under his gospel message, and under the call to go and make disciples together, and so that we would be unified. And then once again, we have 2 churches working together, and so that the 2 of us could come together and be unified, regardless where the decision goes on what it looks like for the future. And so I thank you for those who've been joining us each week for that, and I ask that you would continue that, even though we're not necessarily doing it in any kind of official capacity. As far as the city of Portland, I know that you all watch the news. You probably watched Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, or if you're of my age, my generation, I get most of my news, it seems like, from Twitter, maybe Facebook, Instagram. But regardless, Portland is in the news basically every day. We are at 90 days straight, I think more than 90 now, but 90 plus days of protest somewhere in the city. Now, I've told most of you this before. I may have even said it in my last update. You might ask, well, are you guys okay? Well, when I look at my window, I feel like I am fine. Most of these are isolated in downtown. Now, we are in the city. We are in urban Portland, but we are about 4.5 miles from where this is taking place in downtown Portland. Now, the second most area of activity actually is pretty close to us. It's about a mile away, much of it in our neighborhood. And so when you see things that aren't downtown, but they're in another area of Portland, such as the North Portland Police Precinct. And there's been attempts to burn that building and fires in the street and destruction and looting and rioting. That was literally all in my backyard. Blocks away, things that I walk by, bike by on a daily basis. Now, once again, my family has felt fine. We have felt okay. So I'm not saying that to use any kind of scare tactic, but just say the reality of how close that it is. My wife and kids and I were walking the other day, and we saw a sign that said tear gas might be present in this neighborhood. It's 2 blocks from my house. And so not things I was prepared for or thought I would see in my own neighborhood, but that's just kind of where we have found ourselves. Now, here's the deal. Does the media like to over-embellish what is happening? Absolutely. They're the media. They're going to make it sound like the entire city, every square foot, every square inch is going to be a war zone. That's not where we're at. Once again, my church gathered. We gathered in a park yesterday, and that park is only a few miles away from where this is happening. But are the protests happening? Yes. Now, I don't have time to go into all of this, but as on a brief update, we have participated in some of the peaceful protests. There's been lots of faith leaders, Christian pastors and ministry leaders who've gotten together, and we've had many prayerful gatherings, and we call those a prayerful, peaceful protest. We did one where we walked around an entire area of the city, which is near where Sojourn is primarily focused, and we did a prayer walk. And so people asked, what are you doing? And we said, well, this is what we're doing. This is our form of repentance. We're praying for these things. And so we've been part of some of those things. Now, many of these are turning violent, turning to rioting, and those types of things. And so what I do think is happening is that there is a larger narrative at play. We got to remember, we're in the least religious, most atheistic city in our country. There's a reason that God called my family here. There's a reason that you are supporters of us, partners. Some of you give financially, and you encourage us, and you pray for us. And so I think part of what we're seeing also play out is that. You've got to remember, we are broken humans, myself included, you included, and we found ourselves in a broken world. And so it's like been this perfect storm for this chaos of what we're seeing when things turn violent. But as people of God, I almost feel like we should kind of take a step back and say, should we expect anything differently? In some ways, maybe we should look at the other cities who aren't reacting this way, that are made up of many non-Christians, say, why aren't they acting that way? I'm not saying that to say that this is a good thing, but what I'm saying is it shouldn't necessarily surprise us as much as it does. But what it should do, it should cause us to continue to cry out to God, to get on our knees, and to beg God to rain down in this place. And that the presence of God would overpower the presence of anything else. Of anything else. And so I ask you to continue to pray for the city of Portland. And yes, these are conversations. These are opening doors and opening conversations that we're able to have with neighbors and friends and coworkers. And so pray for us. Pray that we would be the people of peace. And hope that the city of Portland is seeking. Because we believe as the church, we don't want to miss this cultural moment. And I say the church, I mean us broadly, not just Sojourn, but your church as well. We don't want to miss this cultural moment where we found ourselves. If we really believe things that we believe, really believe the Word of God, and I believe we have the hope and the answer to the peace and the reconciliation, the restoration that the people around us are seeking. And so pray that we as Sojourn would not miss this cultural moment that our city is facing right now. Now, on a brief personal note, my family was able to get away for, I think, 4 days. We went up to Spokane, Washington, and to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Coeur d'Alene is absolutely beautiful. We enjoyed both of those. And just allowed us to kind of take a break away from the city and all that's happening and leading. And I've even taken a few weeks off of preaching myself. And so feeling at least refreshed in that way. And so I do ask that you continue to pray for wisdom and for clarity and discernment and leading forward. We are still in a pandemic, in case you forgot. This week, Portland Public Schools start back, and guess where they're starting? Ding, 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 online. Virtual, at least through November 5th, which probably means Thanksgiving, if not through the end of this year. I'm actually sitting in the room that will be our kids' homeschool room, virtual classroom. So just pray for across the board for Portland Public Schools. We partner with an elementary school, it's K through 8 actually, called Vernon School. And all those students, 600 students from Vernon, are starting back on virtual. And so we're praying about how it looks like to partner with them, even in the midst of a virtual school year, at least partial of a school year. And so be praying for them. Be praying for those students. Pray for the college students that are connected to Sojourn, which we have not seen since March, by the way. All of them left with COVID, and none of them have returned, and the colleges they're connected to are not returning in person for this semester. So be praying for them where they are. Also just ask that you be praying, once again, for unity, for what it looks like for us as a church, and then for clarity for what the future looks like. As we roll into September, it's so hard to believe that's tomorrow. Fall is my favorite season here. I think it's the best season in Portland, so feel free to come and visit. We can wear masks and social distance and still enjoy one another's company. But be praying for what it looks like for the rhythms of our church. Typically, life will slow down more anyway when fall hits, and eventually rain will start coming in, probably early October. So we're probably down to a few weeks at best where we can still gather outside like we've been doing church at the park. And so just be praying for wisdom and what that looks like. And then be praying that every single man and woman that's part of Sojourn would see themselves as a missionary. It's easy to get caught up in what's happening in life and forget our call as missionaries. I was just on a video call in Buenos Aires, Argentina last week, actually, and that's what my challenge was to them, that none of us get out of this idea of the Great Commission. None of us get away from being missionaries. So I ask that would be rekindled in all of us, and that we'd really see our role as to make disciples that make disciples. Big gatherings may not always be possible with the pandemic, depending on what restrictions come and go, and even groups in homes. It could be risky for some, and there's caution, they're hesitant. But 2 or 3 gathering together, these discipleship groups that we call tables at Sojourn, they are COVID-proof. And so be praying that we get back to those, that we can see those multiply as we seek to meet new people, as hard as it is right now, and we can seek to see more disciples made. And so thank you so much for your partnership with us. Thank you so much for sticking with us in 2020, as hard as that is. I know that some of you have been laid off from your job. Some of you have maybe lost some employment. And so we've seen a few people drop off financially. We get that. We understand that. That's just a hard reality. And we're trusting that God will continue to provide for you and for us. But thank you for partnering with us. Thank you for praying for us. We ask you to continue to pray for our city. Keep sending those texts. Keep sending those cards. Keep sending those emails. That encourages me more than you know. A lot of times I get that from whoever, and it's a day that I'm having a down day or bad day, and I get to share that with my family and with our church. So please continue to do that. Those are just encouraging to us. And I know that some of your churches are working on figuring out what does it look like to plan a trip out here. And so I know Western Avenue is planning a trip out here at some point in the future. I know that Beaumont's First Baptist is planning a trip out here at some point in the future. I know that First Baptist Plant City, Florida is planning a trip out here. And so be on the lookout from your churches. Talk to your missions pastor or whoever's kind of oversees those things on what that'll look like and when that might be happening if you're interested in joining one of those trips. And then if your church is not looking at taking a trip out here, go talk to your pastor. Go talk to your missions pastor. Why not? And maybe what they're going to look at you and say, great, we have a volunteer. You can now lead this trip. So either way, we look forward to continuing on with you. Thank you so much for partnering with us. I pray that as you end August and enter September yourself, that it would be fruitful and that it would be a great time of blessing as your students return to school and as you enter into the fall rhythms wherever it is that you live as well. All right, gospel partners, have a good rest of the day, and I look forward to updating you in the coming weeks.